A dying alien and the human sacrifice. Captain John Carter ran through the burning forest, his breath heavy, his heart pounding. The alien war had turned this once green planet into a battlefield of smoke and fire. His squad was gone, lost in the chaos. Now he was alone. Then he heard it, a weak sound, a soft cry. He stopped, gripping his plasma rifle tightly. The sound came from the wreckage of a crashed alien ship nearby. Carefully, he moved closer, stepping over broken metal and shattered glass. Inside the wreckage, a figure lay motionless. It was a female alien, her body covered in deep wounds. Blood pooled around her, glowing faintly in the dim light. John recognized her species instantly, the Arvani, a powerful but secretive alien race. The Arvani were known for their intelligence and beauty, their golden eyes and silver hair. But this one was different. Her eyes, half open, were full of pain and desperation. She was barely alive. John knelt beside her. "Can you hear me?" he asked. The alien woman struggled to speak, her voice weak. "Help. Me." John checked her injuries. She had lost too much blood. If she didn't get medical help soon, she wouldn't survive. He quickly pulled out his emergency medkit, scanning her wounds. But then the scanner beeped red. Warning, no compatible blood donors available. John cursed under his breath. The Arvani had a unique blood type, unlike any other species in the galaxy. There was no way to replace what she had lost. Her breathing grew weaker. She didn't have much time left. John clenched his jaw. He had seen too many people die in this war, too many bodies left behind. He couldn't let it happen again. Then, a crazy thought entered his mind. What if? He opened his wrist communicator and called his ship's eye. "Scan my blood. Is there any chance it can help her?" The AI responded quickly. "Human blood is incompatible. However, her body may accept it as a temporary solution. The risk is unknown." John looked at the dying alien. Unknown risk, or certain death. The choice was clear. He grabbed a transfusion injector from the medkit and connected it to his arm. The needle pierced his skin, and dark red human blood started flowing into the injector. His heart raced as he connected the other end to her arm. "Come on," he whispered. "Stay with me." At first, nothing happened. Her breathing was slow, her body still. Then her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered. Her body tensed, as if energy was surging through her veins. John's pulse quickened. It was working. But then, something unexpected happened. Her body began to glow. A strange golden light pulsed under her skin, spreading like wildfire. John had never seen anything like it. The air around her seemed to vibrate. Her breathing became stronger. Her wounds started closing on their own. John pulled back in shock. What the hell? The alien woman gasped, her eyes flying open. For a second, they weren't just gold, they were burning with light. John's mind raced. What had he done? The transfusion should have only stabilized her, not this. The woman sat up suddenly, her breathing fast and deep. Her eyes locked onto his, full of confusion and something else. Something new. John swallowed hard. "Can you move?" She flexed her fingers, then touched her own face, as if making sure she was real. "I feel strange," she whispered. John studied her carefully. Her skin, once pale and weak, now had a strange glow. Her heartbeat was stronger than before. "This shouldn't be possible," he muttered. The alien woman turned to him, eyes sharp. "What did you do to me?" John opened his mouth to answer, but then a warning flashed on his wrist communicator. Multiple life forms detected. Incoming hostiles. John's stomach tightened. The enemy was coming. And now, he wasn't just protecting himself, he had to protect her too. But what had he just created? The miraculous recovery. But something is wrong. John Carter kept his plasma rifle steady, his eyes scanning the trees. The warning on his communicator flashed red. multiple hostiles approaching. The enemy was closing in fast. Behind him, the Arvani woman sat upright, her breathing steady, her wounds completely healed. It was impossible. Minutes ago, she had been dying, her body broken and bleeding out. Now, she looked stronger than ever. John turned to her. "Can you stand?" She blinked at him, confusion in her golden eyes. Then, she placed a hand on the wreckage and pushed herself up. Not only did she stand, she moved with an unnatural grace, her body steady and strong. John had seen battlefield medicine work miracles before, but nothing like this. This was something else. The woman glanced down at herself, then at John. "Your blood," she murmured, her voice a mix of awe and confusion. "It did something to me." John didn't have time to process that. "We need to move. Now." She nodded, though she still looked unsettled. John turned towards the dense jungle, leading the way. The two ran through the burning remains of the battlefield, dodging fallen trees and smoldering debris. The sky above was filled with thick black smoke, the sound of distant gunfire echoing through the valley. John's wrist communicator beeped again. 5 hostiles, 300 meters away, moving fast. He gritted his teeth. "They're tracking us." The Arvani woman glanced at him. "Who are they?" "Mercenaries. Hired guns. Probably sent to finish off survivors." She frowned. "Then let them come." John shot her a sharp look. "That's not how this works. We're outnumbered." She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. Then she spoke softly, as if realizing something. "I don't feel weak anymore." John noticed it too. She wasn't struggling to keep up. In fact, she moved faster than before. Stronger. More balanced. Something was definitely wrong. They reached a rocky cliff overlooking a river. John checked his surroundings. No easy way down, and the enemy was closing in. They were running out of options. Then the woman winced. She clutched her stomach, her breathing uneven. John stepped closer. "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "I don't know. My body feels different." John watched her carefully. Her skin had a strange glow, her pulse visibly throbbing at her neck. "Your wounds healed too fast," he said slowly. "That shouldn't have happened." She looked at him, eyes wide. "I know." Before John could respond, his communicator flashed red again. "Hostiles. 100 meters. Moving in fast." John lifted his rifle. "Stay close." But then, the Arvani woman stepped in front of him. "What are you doing?" he hissed. She turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes scanning the jungle. "I can feel them," she whispered. John stiffened. "You what?" Before he could question her further, the first mercenary appeared from the trees. A tall, armored soldier, his rifle aimed directly at them. "Found you," the soldier sneered. John was about to fire when the Arvani woman moved faster than he could see. 1 second, she was beside him. The next, she was in front of the soldier, gripping his wrist before he could pull the trigger. The man's face twisted in shock. "What the?" With one swift motion, she twisted his arm and snapped it like a twig. The soldier screamed, dropping his weapon. Before John could process what happened, 2 more mercenaries emerged from the jungle, their rifles raised. But the Arvani woman was already moving. She leaped into action, dodging plasma fire with inhuman speed. Her body blurred as she took down the second soldier, grabbing him by the neck and throwing him across the battlefield like he weighed nothing. John stood frozen. She was faster, stronger, deadlier. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just healing. His blood had done something far more dangerous. The third soldier hesitated, fear in his eyes. He turned to run, but the Arvani woman raised her hand. A golden energy pulsed from her palm. And then, the soldier collapsed. John's breath caught in his throat. The mercenary lay on the ground, his body trembling. His eyes were wide, his limbs unresponsive. He wasn't dead. He was paralyzed. John turned to the Arvani woman, his heart pounding. What the hell was that? She stared at her own hands, just as shocked as he was. I don't know. Silence stretched between them. The only sound was the crackling fire and the distant echoes of battle. Then she looked at John, fear creeping into her glowing eyes. Something is changing inside me, she whispered. And I don't know if I can stop it. John took a slow step back, gripping his rifle tightly. What had he done? Whatever his blood had triggered, it wasn't just a cure. It was something else. Something powerful. Something dangerous. And it was just beginning. The impossible pregnancy. John Carter sat on a fallen tree, his mind racing. The fire from the wreckage crackled behind him, casting long shadows over the jungle floor. The battle was still raging in the distance, but he couldn't focus on that now. His eyes were locked on the Arvani woman standing a few feet away. She was staring at her hands, breathing heavily, as if she could still feel the strange power coursing through her veins. Something had changed inside her, something unnatural. Are you okay? John finally asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then slowly she turned to him. Her golden eyes, once full of weakness and pain, now glowed with an eerie intensity. I feel different. Yeah, no kidding, John muttered. You just took down 3 trained mercenaries in under a minute. And that last guy, you didn't even touch him. What the hell was that? She shook her head. I don't know. Her hands trembled slightly. My body feels energized, stronger than before. But there's something else. Something wrong. John narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? She hesitated, then placed a hand on her stomach. I feel something inside me. A warmth. A presence that wasn't there before. John's chest tightened. You're just recovering from the transfusion. Maybe it's a side effect. No, she interrupted. It's not just a feeling. It's growing. John stared at her. Growing. A cold dread settled over him. He had seen a lot of strange things in this war. Alien technology, genetic experiments, enhanced soldiers. But this was something else. Your species doesn't reproduce naturally, right? John asked slowly. She nodded. The Arvani are genetically engineered. We don't have children in the traditional way. Our offspring are created in controlled labs, carefully designed before being born. John frowned. So, it's impossible for you to be. She met his gaze, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. Yes, it's impossible. Silence stretched between them. Then, John took a deep breath. We need to get you checked out. A proper scan, medical equipment. We don't know what's happening to you. She hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. But where? John thought for a moment. His ship was too far, and the battlefield was still crawling with hostiles. But there was a safe house not far from here. An abandoned outpost the military had used months ago. It had a med bay. Follow me, he said. As they moved through the jungle, John kept glancing at her. She walked differently now, her movements smoother, more controlled. She was faster than before, and every step seemed effortless. Whatever was happening to her, it wasn't stopping. The safe house, a shocking discovery. They reached the outpost an hour later. It was an old underground facility, hidden beneath layers of thick vines and fallen trees. The entrance was barely visible, but John knew exactly where to find it. Inside, the air was stale, but the power was still running. The med bay's systems flickered to life as John activated them. Lie down, he instructed, motioning to the scanning table. The Arvani woman hesitated before climbing onto the metallic surface. The scanner hummed as it passed over her, collecting data. John watched the screen, his pulse pounding. The results loaded, and John froze. Biological status. Anomaly detected. Cellular growth. Accelerated. Foreign DNA detected. Hybridization in progress. Confirmed. Pregnancy detected. John felt the air leave his lungs. No, that's not possible. The Arvani woman sat up. What does it say? John hesitated. You might want to see for yourself. She leaned forward, her eyes scanning the data. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something close to fear. This can't be real, she whispered. John ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what's happening, but this thing, this baby, it's growing fast. She looked at him sharply. It's not a baby. It shouldn't even exist. John exhaled slowly. And yet here we are. She slid off the table, her hands trembling. The Arvani were designed to be perfect. No mutations, no weaknesses, no unexpected changes. If my body is changing, if this thing is growing inside me, then we have broken a rule of nature. John crossed his arms. Maybe your kind isn't as perfect as they thought. Maybe there's something in your DNA that allows this to happen. She shook her head. No, this has never happened before. John hesitated before asking the next question. And what if it's not just your DNA? Her eyes widened slightly. John met her gaze. The only new variable here is my blood. Silence. Then, she whispered, you think your blood did this? John shrugged, but there was an uneasiness in his voice. It healed you, made you stronger, gave you abilities you didn't have before. Who's to say it didn't do more? She placed a hand on her stomach again, her fingers trembling. This isn't just a pregnancy, she whispered. It's something else. The implications and the danger ahead. John took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. All right, let's not panic. We need answers. We find a genetic specialist, someone who can analyze what's happening to you. She looked at him with concern. Do you think we have time for that? If this is growing faster than normal. A loud beep interrupted her. John's wrist communicator flashed. Incoming signal DTTTED. His stomach dropped. Someone's tracking us, he said grimly. The Arvani woman's expression darkened. My people. John clenched his jaw. Think they know. She shook her head. Not yet, but they will soon. John's grip tightened on his rifle. This wasn't just a survival mission anymore. This was bigger, more dangerous. The Arvani woman met his gaze, her golden eyes glowing faintly. If they find out what's inside me, they won't let it live. John exhaled sharply. Then we make sure they don't find out. The beeping grew louder. The enemy was coming. And now, they weren't just fighting for their own lives. They were fighting for something that had never existed before. Something that could change everything. The Galactic Council's reaction. The emergency lights flickered as John Carter paced inside the underground safe house, his pulse pounding in his ears. The Arvani woman, Liara, as she had finally told him, stood by the medical console, staring at the screen that still displayed the impossible truth. Pregnant. John ran a hand through his hair. We need to leave. Now. Liara barely responded. She was still processing the reality of her condition. Her golden eyes, once sharp and commanding, were clouded with uncertainty. This shouldn't be happening, she murmured. This shouldn't be possible. John knelt beside her. Listen to me. It doesn't matter how or why. What matters is that someone is tracking us. We can't stay here. Liara inhaled deeply, then nodded. She was a warrior, a strategist. She knew he was right. Just as John turned to grab supplies, the transmission alert flared red. A message from the Galactic Council. John's stomach tightened. He motioned for Liara to stay quiet as he activated the communicator. A holographic screen flickered to life, displaying the Galactic Council's official insignia, a golden spiral surrounded by the symbols of the ruling species. Then the image changed. A stern-faced Arvani official appeared on screen. His silver hair was pulled back in a strict braid, and his expression was ice-cold. High Chancellor Valen. John knew that name. Leader of the Arvani Empire. one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy. To all active forces within the Typhos sector, the Chancellor's voice rang out, calm but commanding. Be advised, an Arvani royal has gone missing during the recent conflict. John stiffened. Royal? He turned toward Lyra, his expression demanding answers. She exhaled sharply, looking away. The Chancellor continued. Princess Lyra of House Velthar is presumed alive, but in unknown company. She may be injured, or worse, compromised. We are authorizing immediate retrieval. Any entity found harboring her will be considered an enemy of the Arvani Empire. John's fingers curled into fists. Princess. Lyra's shoulders tensed. I didn't lie to you, she said softly. I just didn't tell you everything. John exhaled through his nose. Fantastic. So now I'm harboring royalty. And every bounty hunter in the system will be coming for us. But the Chancellor wasn't finished. The hologram flickered again, and a second figure appeared, a human. Fleet Admiral Rains. John's chest tightened, the highest-ranking officer in the human Dominion. Rains spoke, his voice grim. The Dominion acknowledges the Arvani Empire's concerns. We are issuing a sector-wide order. If Princess Lyra is found, she must be returned immediately. This is a matter of galactic stability. John cursed under his breath. The humans were involved now, too. And then, one last thing. The Chancellor's eyes darkened. If the princess is found to be carrying any unnatural contamination, she is to be terminated. Lyra inhaled sharply. John's blood ran cold. What did he just say? The transmission ended. Silence filled the room. Then, Lyra whispered, They know. John turned to her, his jaw tightening. No, they suspect. But if they knew for sure, they wouldn't be sending search parties. They'd be sending execution teams. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself, something John had never seen her do before. It was a defensive gesture, something deeply human. They won't let it live, she murmured. John's fists clenched. Then we don't let them find you. The hunt begins. The safe house was no longer safe. John and Lyra moved quickly, gathering supplies and weapons. They needed an escape plan. John activated his wrist communicator, searching for potential routes off-world. But every major transport hub was on lockdown. The Arvani and the Dominion had blocked every legal way out of the system. We're trapped here, John muttered. Lyra studied the holographic map. Not necessarily. She pointed to a location deep within the uncharted regions of the jungle. An old research facility. John frowned. What's there? Answers. John studied her carefully. Answers to what? Lyra hesitated. The Arvani have controlled our evolution for centuries. But there have always been whispers, old records buried deep within restricted archives. I once heard rumors about an abandoned facility where they studied hybridization, attempts to merge Arvani genetics with other species. John's stomach twisted. And you think that facility might explain what's happening to you? Lyra nodded. If there's any place that holds the truth, it's there. John considered it. It was risky. The jungle was filled with mercenaries and automated defense drones left over from the war. But it was their only lead. All right, he said. Then that's where we go. A dangerous escape. They didn't make it far before trouble found them. As they moved through the jungle under the cover of darkness, John's wrist communicator flashed red. Movement detected. Multiple life forms. Lyra tensed. They found us. John pulled his rifle, scanning the trees. It wasn't just Arvani hunters. It was humans, too. The Dominion and the Arvani had sent their best, working together to eliminate what they saw as a threat. John exhaled sharply. Stay close. We're running. The first plasma bolt whizzed past them, slamming into a tree. The chase was on. John and Lyra sprinted through the dense jungle, dodging gunfire. But their pursuers were fast, and they had drones scanning the area. They wouldn't last long like this. Liara suddenly skidded to a stop, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. John grabbed her wrist. "What the hell are you doing? Keep moving." But Liara didn't move. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. And then, the jungle pulsed. John felt it. A shift in the air, an unseen energy spreading outward. The mercenaries chasing them suddenly staggered. Some dropped their weapons. One of them clutched his head, gasping. John stared. "Did you just?" Liara opened her eyes. "I didn't mean to." Her powers were growing, changing. And for the first time, John wasn't sure if she was in control anymore. The next step. They made it to the edge of the jungle, leaving their pursuers behind. For now. John leaned against a rock, breathing hard. "You're getting stronger. Fast." Liara's hands trembled. "I don't know how to stop it." John met her gaze. "We find that facility. We figure this out, and we make sure no one gets to you before we do." Liara nodded. But deep inside, both of them knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future. A future the entire galaxy was willing to kill to stop. The chase begins, hunted by their own. The dense jungle stretched endlessly before them, a tangled maze of towering trees and thick vines. The air was heavy with moisture, the ground damp beneath their hurried steps. John Carter moved swiftly, his rifle held close, his senses on high alert. Beside him, Liara walked with an unnatural grace, her movements more fluid than before. She was changing. John had spent years in combat, facing threats from every corner of the galaxy. But this was something new, something he couldn't understand, and that terrified him more than the enemy hunting them. Liara was no longer just an Arvani soldier. She was something else, something impossible. The hunters close in. John checked his wrist communicator. Enemy signals, getting closer. They weren't just being tracked anymore. They were being herded. Liara's breathing was steady, but John could see the tension in her golden eyes. "They're not trying to kill us," she said. "Not yet." John glanced at her. "They want you alive." She nodded. "They need to understand what's happening to me." John tightened his grip on his rifle. "And when they do, they'll kill you." Liara didn't respond. They both knew it was true. Suddenly, a mechanical screech echoed through the jungle. John spun, aiming his rifle. Drones. Black, spider-like machines hovered in the air, their scanning beams sweeping through the trees. John cursed. Stealth was no longer an option. "We have to move. Now." They broke into a sprint as the drones locked onto them, their plasma cannons charging. The first shot slammed into a tree beside them, sending splinters flying. John rolled forward, barely avoiding another blast. Liara didn't slow down. She was moving faster than humanly possible. John barely kept up. "Okay, that's new," he muttered under his breath. Liara glanced back, eyes glowing faintly. She wasn't even out of breath. John's chest burned. "I hate running," he growled. Liara smirked. "You should try evolving." John would have laughed if another plasma shot hadn't exploded nearby. They'd reached a cliffside, the jungle ending abruptly. Below them, a rushing river carved through the rocky canyon. John glanced back. Drones incoming. No time to think. He looked at Liara. "You trust me?" She hesitated. "Do I have a choice?" John grinned. "Not really." And then, he grabbed her hand and jumped. Into the river, and into the unknown. The fall was short but brutal. The icy water swallowed them whole, pulling them into its violent current. John fought to surface, gasping for air. Beside him, Liara floated effortlessly, barely struggling against the rapids. John cursed under his breath. Of course, she was adapting. They let the current carry them downstream, the jungle growing distant. Above, the drones hovered for a moment before retreating. The hunters had lost them. For now, John swam to the riverbank, dragging himself onto the shore. He coughed up water, rolling onto his back. I hate this plan already. Liara sat beside him, completely unfazed. It worked. John sighed. Yeah, well, next time, let's try an escape plan that doesn't involve drowning. She tilted her head. You survived. John groaned, pushing himself up. Barely. Something is changing, and it's not just her. As they caught their breath, John noticed something odd. His wounds were healing faster, the scratches from the jungle chase already fading. He flexed his fingers. His hands didn't ache as much as they should have. The exhaustion in his muscles wasn't as bad as before. His eyes darted to Lyra. You said you feel something inside you changing. She nodded slowly. John hesitated. What if it's not just you? Lyra's eyes widened slightly. You mean? John exhaled. I gave you my blood. It changed you. But what if you're changing me too? Silence. Then, Lyra whispered, human adaptability. John frowned. What? She sat up straighter, realization dawning in her eyes. Your species is unique, John. Humans adapt faster than any other race in the galaxy. Your immune system, your resilience, it's why you survive places no other species can. John narrowed his eyes. And she touched her stomach, the impossible life growing inside her. If my body absorbed the traits of your blood, and it's affecting my evolution, then what if it's happening the other way too? John swallowed hard. You're saying I might be. Liara met his gaze. Changing. The facility. And the answers they need. John didn't know what terrified him more. The fact that Liara was evolving into something beyond an Arvani. Or the possibility that he was too. Either way, they needed answers. The old research facility was their only lead. John stood, offering his hand. Let's go. Liara hesitated before taking it. Her grip was warmer than before, stronger. John felt something stir inside him. Something new. Something alien. As they walked into the unknown, the real question loomed in John's mind. Was he still entirely human? Or was he becoming something else? The final confrontation. The choice that will change everything. The ruins of the old research facility loomed before them, half buried in the dense jungle. Metal walls, corroded by time, jutted from the earth like the bones of some forgotten giant. The structure was barely intact, vines creeping through shattered windows. The roof caved in places. The facility had been abandoned for decades, yet the moment John Carter and Lyra stepped inside, it felt alive. Faint lights flickered in the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of old machinery and decayed metal. John adjusted his rifle, scanning the dim corridors. I don't like this. Lyra stepped forward, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the low light. This place holds answers, she whispered. John wasn't so sure. It felt more like a tomb. The secrets of the facility. They moved carefully, stepping over debris and broken consoles. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Then they found it. A reinforced door, rusted but still intact. The words, Experimental Biological Advancement Division, were barely visible under layers of grime. Liara placed a hand against it. The metal pulsed beneath her fingers. John's pulse quickened. Liara, what's happening? She pulled her hand away, her breath shaky. Something inside. It's reacting to me. John tried to override the security panel, but the system was dead. No power. We'll have to find another way in. Liara exhaled sharply, then did something John did not expect. She raised her hand and placed it flat against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the metal began to shift. John's eyes widened as the door melted away, like liquid steel rippling from Lyara's touch. She stumbled back, staring at her own hands. I didn't mean to. John's grip tightened on his rifle. We really need to figure out what the hell is happening to you. Lyara swallowed hard. Then, without another word, she stepped inside. The truth about the Arvani, and a hybrid experiment. The room beyond was eerily intact. A laboratory. John's eyes swept across the consoles, the old containment pods lining the walls, the long-dead machines coated in dust. A large holographic database flickered weakly in the center of the room. Liara moved toward it. As she approached, the system suddenly powered on. John took a step back, his instincts screaming at him. Liara. The hologram flared to life, displaying ancient Arvani records. Then, the truth was revealed. The Arvani were not naturally evolved. They had been engineered. Long ago, the Arvani's creators sought a perfect species. But they failed. The only way to complete their design was human DNA. John's breath caught in his throat. The Arvani were never supposed to be purely Arvani. They were always meant to merge with humanity. Liara staggered back. No, this isn't possible. John clenched his fists. Your people lied to you. They'd been hiding this for centuries. Liara's voice was barely a whisper. They erased this history. John turned to her, his heart pounding. Liara, you're not the first. She looked up at him, confusion in her glowing eyes. John gestured to the records. The experiments were stopped. The hybrids never happened. He exhaled sharply. Until now. Her hands trembled. She placed them over her stomach. John's voice was low. You're not just changing. You're completing the evolution that was meant to happen. Liara took an unsteady breath. And they will do anything to stop it. Before John could respond, the alarms blared. The enemy arrives, and the choice they must make. John's wrist communicator flashed red. Incoming hostiles. He cursed. They tracked us. Liara's eyes darkened. They're coming for the baby. John checked his rifle. Then we make sure they don't get it. The doors behind them exploded inward. Arvani elite soldiers. Their black armor gleamed under the flickering lights. Plasma rifles locked onto John and Liara. A cold, commanding voice rang out. Surrender. Liara took a slow step forward, her hands raised. But John saw it in her stance. She wasn't surrendering. The lead soldier aimed directly at her. Come with us, princess. You know what must be done. Liara's expression was unreadable. And what is that? The soldier's grip tightened. You will be purified. John's stomach twisted. They weren't here to capture her. They were here to erase her. Before anyone could move, Liara raised her hand. The room shook. The soldiers staggered, their weapons shaking in their hands. Their armor flickered, energy surging through them. John backed away as Liara's entire body began to glow. Golden veins of light pulsed across her skin. The soldiers collapsed, gasping for breath. John could feel it, a pulse of raw power. Liara wasn't just defending herself. She was awakening. The final choice, escape or fight. John watched as the soldiers struggled, their bodies frozen under Liara's invisible grip. She turned to him, her voice steady but full of something different. I can end this, John. His chest tightened. What are you saying? She exhaled slowly. I can make them forget. Wipe their minds. They won't remember me. Or the child. John's eyes widened. You can do that. Liara looked down at her hands. I don't know how I know. I just do. John hesitated. If you do this, there's no going back. Liara's eyes met his. They will never stop hunting us. John. But if I do this, we disappear. We live. John clenched his jaw. And if you can't control it? She hesitated. Then we fight. Silence stretched between them. John looked at the fallen soldiers, the truth burning in his mind. The entire galaxy wanted them dead. This was the only way out. He exhaled. Do it. Liara closed her eyes. A wave of energy surged through the room. The soldiers shuddered, their expressions going blank. John felt something tug at his mind, like a whisper at the edge of his thoughts. Then, silence. The soldiers stood confused, their weapons lowered, their faces empty. John's heart pounded. It worked. Lara swayed slightly, her breathing unsteady. John caught her before she fell. She looked up at him, exhaustion in her golden eyes. "We're free." John nodded. "For now." They turned toward the open jungle. No more running. No more hiding. Now they had a future to build. Together. And the galaxy. It would never be the same. A new beginning, or the end of everything. The jungle stretched before them, dark and endless. The research facility, the Arvani soldiers, the battle. All of it was behind them now. John Carter adjusted the strap of his rifle, glancing at Lara as she walked beside him. Her golden eyes still flickered with energy, though exhaustion lined her face. She had done something impossible. She had erased their existence from the minds of the Arvani hunters. But for how long? John knew that the Arvani Empire was relentless, even if their memories were gone. The moment another high-ranking officer asked about Princess Lara, suspicions would return. The hunt would start again. He exhaled, scanning the horizon. They needed to disappear. Lara seemed to sense his thoughts. "We can't run forever," she murmured. John looked at her. "Then what do we do?" She placed a hand on her stomach, the impossible child growing inside her. "We find a way to make sure they never come for us again." John frowned. "How do we do that?" Lara met his gaze. "We change the galaxy. The plan. And the risk of everything." John wasn't sure if she was exhausted or if she truly believed what she was saying. "Change the galaxy." He scoffed. "Yeah, because that's easy." Lara's eyes narrowed. "I'm serious." John sighed. "All right. Say we go public. Say we tell the entire galaxy that the Arvani were designed to merge with humans. That this whole purity thing is a lie. Do you really think they'll just accept that?" Lara hesitated. "No, not at first." John crossed his arms. "Exactly. They'll brand you a mutation. They'll try to destroy every trace of what you are, of what we created." He exhaled sharply. "They won't just come after you. They'll come after every human, every Arvani, anyone who dares to believe in this." Lara's fingers curled into fists. "Then we show them the truth." John raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that?" Lara took a deep breath, her expression unreadable. "By surviving." John frowned. Lara continued, her voice steady. "If we disappear, they'll hunt us forever. If we die, they'll erase every trace of what happened here." She looked at John. "But if we live, if the child is born, and they see what it is, then they can't ignore it." John clenched his jaw. "You're saying we let the entire galaxy know about the baby?" Lara nodded. John cursed under his breath. "That's a death sentence." Lara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "It's the only way." John hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to protect her and the child at all costs. But deep down, he knew she was right. If they ran, they would be hunted. If they fought, they would eventually lose. But if they showed the galaxy the truth, if the Arvani and the Dominion saw that evolution was inevitable, they might just change everything. John exhaled sharply. "Fine. But we do this on our terms." Lara nodded. "Agreed." John checked his wrist communicator, scanning for any nearby ships. "There's an abandoned smuggler's dock 3 clicks east of here. If we can find a ship, we're off this planet." Lara smirked. "Stealing a ship? I thought you were a soldier." John grinned. "I was. But I've learned a few new tricks." The escape. One last fight. They moved quickly, cutting through the jungle as quietly as possible. But luck was never on their side. As they neared the smuggler's dock, John's communicator flashed red. "Motion detected. Multiple hostiles." John cursed. "They're here." Lara's expression darkened. "They shouldn't remember us." John gritted his teeth. Then someone's memory came back. A spotlight flared to life, illuminating the trees. A voice boomed through the comms. "Surrender immediately." John raised his rifle. "Yeah, not happening." Gunfire erupted. John and Lyra dove for cover as plasma bolts scorched the trees around them. John returned fire, taking down a soldier with a clean shot. Lyra, however, didn't need a gun. She stepped into the open, her golden eyes burning like twin stars. The air shimmered around her. And then, the soldiers froze. John's heart pounded as he watched. Lyra wasn't just stopping their bodies. She was stopping their minds. The soldiers stood motionless, weapons slipping from their hands. Their breathing slowed. Their eyes glazed over. John swallowed hard. "Lyra, what are you doing?" She looked back at him, her voice eerily calm. "Giving us a chance." John stepped forward cautiously. "You're in their heads." Lyra nodded. John exhaled. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was power. And it terrified him. A new beginning, or the end of everything. They'd reached the smuggler's dock, finding an old but functional starship. John prepped the engines while Lyra stood outside, staring at the stars. John hesitated before joining her. "You okay?" She didn't look at him. "I felt them." John frowned. "The soldiers?" Lyra shook her head. "Everyone. The entire Arvani network. It's like I could hear them all. Their fears, their thoughts." She swallowed. "And for a moment, I could have changed them." John stiffened. "What do you mean?" Lyra turned to him. "I could have rewritten them. Made them forget. Made them different." John's blood ran cold. "But you didn't." She exhaled. "No, but I could." Silence. Then, John said softly, "That's a dangerous path, Lyra." She nodded. "I know." John studied her, searching for the woman he had met days ago. The dying Arvani princess. The soldier. The survivor. She was still there. But now she was something more. Something powerful. Something that could change the future. John placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out. Together." Lyra met his gaze. "No matter what happens." John nodded. "No matter what." She took one last look at the stars. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped onto the ship. John followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The engines roared to life. The ship lifted off, carrying them away from the jungle, away from the war, toward the unknown, toward the future, a future that the entire galaxy would soon fear. Because somewhere, deep inside Lyra, something new was waiting to be born. And when it came into the world, nothing would ever be the same again.